Okay, I should wait to do this before I start the recording. All right, eyeballs. Let's draw some eyeballs. Once we have this and we need to place our eye, again, everybody's different. A lot of people will draw an eyeball like this, just an olive shape. If you look at a lot of Mesopotamian art or early Greek art or Egyptian art, you'll just see an olive or an almond. That's not enough. Eyeballs are, again, you have sort of a sideways V shape. Longer arcs on the top and bottom, like so, that are rounded. Now, again, everybody's different. This arc might be sort of a downward sloping one. Again, some people have a little bit more fat or muscle right there. Sometimes these are, again, you have sort of the tear duct too that you can throw in there. But they're not a symmetrical or simple shape. It's this more of a wedge shape. I need a better eraser. This one is just too smudgy. Right, and again, you're going to have to look at the individual and find out, okay, what is exactly their shape. And I oftentimes will, but if I'm just making up an eyeball like I am now, I'll tuck this one underneath. Again, because you have oftentimes your eyelid and sometimes some fat or some flesh right there that will overlap. And so this looks a little bit better than just your generic almond eye. But some people do have almond-shaped eyes, and again, you're going to have to look at that. But usually they're asymmetrical, because what you have inside the eyeball is a gigantic globe. And if you think about it, behind your eyeball is really about this big. So here's your eye, what we can see, and what's going on behind that is huge. It's a huge sphere. And so if you treat it like a sphere, well, then that might help you kind of understand that, how three-dimensional it is, and help you understand the anatomy around it. So one thing my teacher used to do was just say, pretend it's an orange with sort of a section cut out of the peel. And that's your eye. And so imagine this being an orange, and sort of right in the middle, I'm going to cut out a section of it. And the peel, remember, is three-dimensional, and so you can see the cross-section of the peel sometimes. That's your eyebrow. That's your eyelash, right? That's the skin that's on top of. And again, once you understand this as a sphere, you can start understanding it as a three-dimensional globe that has shadows. And so you can use that sometimes to kind of determine, okay, well, where are the shadows, right? And you can see this on your own eye sometimes, especially if someone has protruding eyes or those bulging eyes. But if you view this as a globe, the shadows on the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid will follow sort of the pattern of a sphere. Usually, because you have this huge globe inside your head that sometimes, again, people will just draw an almond and be done with it, but not seeing that there's more to it. And then this determines the anatomy. So this, your brow's up here, right? And so this might be part of your nose. This whole hole, you've got a gigantic hole in your skull. If you look at a skull, the hole for our eyeball is gigantic. And so, yeah, I can kind of come in here and start building something around this sphere. And then, again, maybe somebody has baggy eyes. Well, that's a little bit of flesh that's being pushed out by. And let's say here's our nose, maybe. Here's the bridge. Here's a muscle, too, that kind of goes right here that you'll see. So oftentimes that determines where a shadow is. But again, I'm sort of building this stuff around a globe. And you don't have to draw the globe. Again, I try not to draw too much that's unnecessary, but understanding this as a sphere is very helpful. So you have eyes. They're shaped, I don't know, I kind of call it a chevron. I don't know what to call this shape. And again, usually, depending on the person, their cornea and their pupil, the iris, go outside of this shape. But remember, since this is a sphere, the shadows are going to be kind of following that sphere. There's shadows and stuff within the eye, because a lot of people will just draw, you know, your almond eye and then this and then this, and that's flat and two-dimensional and cartoonish. Your pupil's not always that dark, right? Sometimes there's a dark side and a light side because it's catching light, because you have this maybe a shadow, or sometimes there's a shadow underneath the eyelash, especially if you have a really big like a cast shadow, especially if you have a big eyelash or something, or eyebrow. So keep that in mind. Again, really pay attention to what someone's eyes are shaped like. They're not going to be a perfect almond all the time. And again, try to understand the eyeball as a sphere with this sort of cutout, and all you're seeing is part of that sphere. Okay. So let's do noses. While I'm recording, let's just do noses. And again, in Bridgman, there's entire sections on noses. Generally speaking, the nose, in the most simplest terms, is kind of a wedge, a triangular wedge shape, right? You can start there. Then, again, depending on the person, some people have a almost like a serpent-like shape here. The bulb of the nose, some are rounder, so sometimes I'll just sort of do that. And then again, you have the actual nasal bone, which is, again, sort of shaped like this. And so this is sort of a big bulbous thing. And then you have the sort of the nostril hanging off the side. And then again, depending on where the bone is, you can start knocking in some value. And everybody's different. Ultimately, you're going to have to find out. Again, some people have more of swooping noses. You can convert this shape into this. Right? So again, treat it kind of like a sort of a weird triangular shape. And round things out, and then start specifying, you know, what people actually look at. Again, with noses, there's always that muscle right here that is pretty evident on some people. This bone, the nasal bone, is differently defined on different people, etc. But I just really simplify it down to sort of a triangular wedge shape that, you know, you can sort of view like this. I know that's, oh, I can't see my drawing. It can be broken down into something as simple as that to begin. And then you start, again, building off of that. So building off, okay, well, this person has a really bulbous nose, right? Or they have a really narrow nose, like Michael Jackson, right? So these measurements, how wide this is, what this angle is it more round, right? So some noses can look like this, but just some variation on this kind of wedge-like shape. Make sure that's in camera. And then adding on to that whatever the unique things are. So again, some people's noses will have sort of a rounder, more rounded shape. I will oftentimes, you know, draw lines across. These lines of perspective will help you sort of determine where things are. And then sometimes their nostrils are larger, sometimes they're smaller, sometimes this wedge is wider. Sometimes the nose is very flat and it's mostly bridge. you're really going to have to look at your subject. Okay, those are noses. Let's move down here and do maybe some lips. The lip is kind of composed of usually 2 muscles along the bottom and roughly 3 along the top. I'm not sure if my anatomy is correct. And again, some variation on this, like some of these muscles are larger. So the bottom lip can have kind of a square feel to it. This tiny little muscle here, sometimes it's more pronounced on others than some. And then you have these 2 muscles kind of right here. Again, my anatomy might be a little bit off, but this is usually how I think about it. And again, this changes. Can I make those lips, those muscles just really, really thin? Some people have a more pronounced cleft, right? Some people have this cleft that comes down from the base of your nose. Some people do not. Again, but I just generally sort of draw sort of this wedge shape and these sort of muscles here. Some people's upper lip is larger than their lower lip or vice versa. And then I kind of have these sort of 3 muscles here that help me kind of start to shape out the lips. And again, if you want the outside of the lips to line up with the center of the eyes, keep that in mind. So again, everybody's different, there are variations, but I will kind of start with 2 big muscles with sort of 3 sort of smaller sections, and everything sort of falls off of that generally. And then start looking for those variations. Again, I've got a large lower lip, and so these might be a little bit bigger on some people. Okay. Last but not least, ears. Again, depending on, and Bridgman kind of does this funny thing where they sort of classify it as like a horn shape, like kind of looks like the end of a trumpet or a trombone from the side. A lot of artists will just sort of simplify this into the question mark shape, which I think is okay. I think that's a decent way to break it down. Bridgman breaks it down a little bit more. Again, this is on, you sort of have the question mark shape, and then this sort of hood. This kind of comes into the ear canal. And then again, depending on the person, they either have a large earlobe, here's the face, here's the cheekbone. Sometimes they'll have a large earlobe, a connected earlobe, a disconnected earlobe. Okay, whoever is not on mute, please turn on mute. We're recording. I'm hearing some background noise. So again, question mark shape I think is an okay place to start. All right, I'm going to have to pause really quick here. Nope, we good? All right. Start with the question mark shape. Add on the sort of the external hood. And again, sort of kind of wedge shaped, sort of. I like adding these 3-dimensional aspects of it. And the inside, again, depending on who you're looking at, depending on what you're looking at, you'll have just some small additional details that you can add. Let me kind of zoom in on, maybe I don't have it in this PDF. More specific, yeah, this is just faces. Again, I'll post the entire section with faces in it. But if this is all you do, I think that's enough, because you do have, again, those weird ridges and stuff that kind of come in here and come across. But if you just start with this, I think that's a decent start. Again, I can kind of, again, my eraser's really smudgy. start kind of clarifying these wedge shapes. But I think the simplest way to break it down is sort of a big question mark with a three-dimensional sort of front and back and side to it. And then again, you got to look at the individual. This usually comes into the cheekbone. Again, remember the jawbone's down here. And then the ear canal sort of right roughly in here. That's enough. With the variations that you're noticing on a human being. Again, from the side depends. You know, some people's ears come out further. Again, Bridgman kind of breaks it down into this almost trumpet-like or trombone-like protrusion. So you can kind of see that as a three-dimensional thing like that, and then start breaking it into individual parts. So if you treat it like the horn, or the bell rather, of the trombone, to start with sort of a question mark like shape, I think that's a good start. And then again, you have some of those weird ridges and stuff in here that some people have. But start there. Keep it simple and then add on those details as you come. And again, how far out a person's ear, how far forward, how flat they are, is all stuff that you're going to have to observe. But this is a good place to start. So again, like I did here, I just mostly just did a question mark, right? That's a good start. Start there, and then tack on some of those details, change some of those shapes depending on what you're looking at. Ears, mouth, nose, eyes, face. Check Bridgman out. Bridgman does more or less what I did with a little bit more detail. I hope that makes sense. Again, I'm going to stop recording and I'll upload this here in a second, unless there's any questions that we can field right now.
I'm all right.
Okay.